Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're all doing good and well. So for this Friday's album review, I'm reviewing the 8th studio album from the technical death metal band Origin and their release Chaosmos, which came out today via Nuclear Blast, and the album is 8 tracks and 44 minutes in length. Now, I am pretty new to this band. In fact, I haven't really heard any of their material before. I don't think I've heard the name Origin. But yeah, it's the first time I've really delved into one of their albums, and I've got to say, I thought this album was pretty awesome. Pretty much, most of this album, I was really enjoying this, and the first half of the album in particular, I thought was an absolute blast. A fantastic death metal tour, technical death metal tour de force. And those tracks. In fact, if I was scoring this album purely on its first half alone, this would be a 9 out of 10, possibly even a 9.5 out of 10. I was that impressed by the earlier tracks on this album. So, I mean, if you're an Origin fan as well, I'd really like to hear from you in terms of what other of their albums I should check out, because I did really enjoy this, and I'd like to know, are there any other albums you think I should go to next, having heard this Chaosmos as my first album of this band. So, all that being said, let's get into the band lineup. So the band members of this band, you've got Paul Ryan on guitars and backing vocals, Mike Flores on bass and backing vocals, John Longstreth on drums, and Jason Kieser is the lead vocalist for the band. And like I'm saying, I think the start of the album, the first few tracks, I really, really liked, and it was just as the album kind of got about 2/3 of the way through, maybe, that I found there were one or two choices they made that I didn't quite like as much. I thought this album was at its strongest when it was at its fiercest, at its most fastest, its most technical. But with some elements, a bit of groove here and there, and a lot of chugging, which were also pretty cool in a lot of this album too. So let's go into some of the tracks now. Starting with the first track, Ecophagy, which was a pretty awesome opener, using those sort of sweeping guitar techniques quite a bit, and this guitar lick, which made me think of 1990s video games, kind of platform. It had that sound to it, just the sort of 1990s video game sounds. I just got that feeling when I was listening to Ecophagy. Another fantastic track, Cogito came in non sum, I think, kind of weird Latin title. But that carried on this array of blast beats, interesting time signatures, changes, a really awesome battering guitar, awesome battering guitar rhythms for a lot of that track too. Now, Panoptical, which might just be my favourite on the album, another one, in a lot of these album reviews, I'm saying, oh, this might be my track of the year, my song of the year. Well, here we go again, because Panoptical, I feel, is another contender for that top 10 track list I'm going to do at the end of the year. Offering up some classical style guitar solos, I thought, in this a little bit more, maybe. I don't know, but hyperspeed rhythms and more savage riffs in this track that I really like too. So Panoptical, great track. At this point, you're about 15 minutes into the album. You get Decolonizer, which is slightly different, a bit thrashier, and the track evolves a little into a couple of different phases too, with a bit of a deathcore style bridge on this track, as I recall, which is quite interesting. Lots of interesting harsh vocal alternating on this song as well. I quite like Coalscape, with a slightly more black metal style to that track, and still really good up-tempo stuff. Nostalgia for Oblivion was a track which didn't quite keep my interest as much. It was a slower tempo track overall, even though it did have moments of faster, more of the faster kind of pummeling sections in it. But it was just one I didn't keep my attention as well for the duration of the track. And then you got an interesting choice for the last track, a sort of 11-minute track called Heat Death. And for most of that track, I really enjoyed it. It was sort of, lots of this chugging rhythm. Sounding by now pretty familiar for this album. This certainly was carrying on a style which we were by now as listeners, I think, pretty familiar with. But I did really like it. But my one issue with the Heat Death kind of epic length track we had at the end was that the last 3 minutes were this kind of weird, sort of really slow section that was almost a little bit doomy. But for me, I think they'd have been better off not having that and just finishing off with maybe just some sort of a drum blast or a cymbal or something like that right at the end of the, after that sort of 8-minute section, that was the sort of bulk of the song. But overall, really, really strong album from Origin. If you're tech death inclined and like me, you're not familiar with Origin, I would say this is worth a listen, at least, just to check it out, because as I say, I found this to be a strong release. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. And I think this is an album that I will be revisiting quite a bit. I enjoyed it certainly enough to give this one some more spins. Otherwise, from me, just a reminder of the new series I've got coming up on Sunday evening, which is the Album That series, where I'm talking about personal connections I have with album. And the first episode is talking about an album that made me feel superstitious. So it's an interesting, unique beginning to that series. Otherwise, from me, take care, everybody. Have a great weekend, and bye for now.